Hello, class. This is Chapter 5, The Interplay of Love, Sex, and Marriage. In particular, sorry, I gotta see my notes. I gotta look up a little bit. This is a polyandrous society in the high Himalayas, a place that I spent some time, but I didn't, when I was in the Himalayas with the Tibetans and everything, I didn't really spend a lot of time with individual families or talking to them about their polyandrous relationships. Indeed, I don't speak Tibetan, so I probably wasn't really aware of who was married to who in the households I was staying with, but this is a group of people I have a little bit of experience with. So, just to give you a little bit of a reminder what polyandry was, remember that we went over some of these concepts polyandry and sorrel marriage, fraternal marriage, some of these things that we've talked about before in our kinship lesson. So, if you need a reminder, just go back to that. So, polyandry is a marriage practice in which one woman is married to more than one man at the same time. And now there are subcategories of polyandry, such as fraternal polyandry and sorrel polyandry. This group of people are fraternal polyandrous. So, that's where one woman marries a set of brothers, moves into their house, and acquires their lineage. So, one woman from outside of the family moves in with the brothers, and the brothers are both married to the same woman. Now, sorrel polyandry would just be the opposite of that, where there are two sisters sharing one husband. But we will not worry about that. Don't want you to get too confused, but just realize that that exists as well. So hopefully, if you're following the order that I've set all these different lessons up in, you've done this reading. So I just want to ask you, what environmental factors contribute to the cultural development of polyandry, and what are the benefits? What are the pros of this kind of marriage? Well, if you've done this reading, then let me sort of give you some of the answers. Like in our last reading, I'm trying to get us to realize that there is a really tight connection between biology, that is our evolved evolutionary sexual drives, and our evolved evolutionary need for compassionate, or I'm sorry, companionate and romantic intimacy. These are something that are baked into our biology, but those things interact with our culture, which we are starting to realize, but also our environment, which I think we're starting to dig into a little bit more. So, why polyandry? Well, around the world, you tend to see polyandrous societies crop up in very specific environments, and that is places that are resource poor. The high Himalayas, it's very, very difficult to raise very many animals. There's not a lot of animals that can live up there, and there's not very many different crops that can grow up there either. And so it is what we call a resource poor area with unpredictable climate and life threatening conditions. And so having multiple husbands for one spouse is great because it severely limits population growth. You don't want to have one good year of plant growth or something like that lead to a population explosion, and then the next 10 years you have a drought or something. You will end up with this sort of feast and famine type mentality, and you don't want that. So over eons, not eons, but over hundreds of thousands of years, these cultures have adapted and evolved this polyandrous mode of marriage, right? So it creates a high ratio of adults to children per household, but in particular, men, because men are able to go out. They are in charge of a lot of the economic activity. They go out and farm, they go out and bring in resources to the household, while the woman is only taking care of a limited number of children. So that means that the children, the offspring of this group of brothers, is more likely to survive having two fathers. Having both fathers allows more resources coming into that one child. And so that one child in this very tough, unpredictable environment is more likely to survive. So if you had two groups of people in the high Himalayas, one is polyandrous and the other is not, the polyandrous society is more likely to become dominant, is more likely to reproduce and live on, which is why you see them. They outcompete the non-polyandrous groups. So polyandrous households are significantly wealthier with higher socioeconomic statuses relative to the monogamous ones that are in these groups. There are some monogamous group that are from the Indian lineage, the Indian portions of the Himalayas that tend to be more monogamous, that are not as wealthy, that do not are and they're not as successful in this environment because of this one cultural adaptation. So let's talk about, though, other kinds of polyandry. There is fraternal and non-fraternal polyandry. Now, this group is fraternal polyandrous, and that means that the two brothers will pool their resources and enhance cooperation between the co-husbands, because they see the child of their wife that could be theirs or it could be their brother's, but it doesn't really matter that much to them, in the sense that no matter what, they are related to that child by blood very succinctly. It is either their child or it is their brother's child, so they can be pretty sure that this child shares a lot of DNA with them, and they aren't actively thinking that way, but it makes sense. So it maximizes inclusive fitness. Now, I want to distinguish, too, as your book does, between personal fitness, that is the number of offspring that an individual begets, regardless of who rescues, rears, supports them, and inclusive fitness, which is the number of offspring equivalents that an individual rears, rescues, or otherwise supports through its behavior, regardless of who begets them, right? So this is maximizing inclusive fitness for the whole group, not just the individual, because you are maximizing the fitness of potentially some other man's child, but that man is your brother, so it's not exactly totally unrelated to you. So yeah, this is fraternal polyandry. Now, non-fraternal polyandry does exist. You tend to see it in places that are either resource poor like this, or places where there is very high incidences of male death, such as places that experience lots and lots of warfare for a very extended period of time, where women will take on multiple husbands because it is highly likely that one of her husbands will die. It may not necessarily matter if they're fraternal or non-fraternal, because men are dying at very young ages quite frequently due to warfare. So it's not very common, but you do see it in parts of Northern Africa, places and South America. So husbands are not brothers, and so they have opposite effective strategies, right? Now, I'm talking about biological strategies, not necessarily cultural strategies, but they are related. They have opposite biological strategies to perpetuate their gene pool. Co-husbands who are not brothers do not share economic resources with each other in general, and that's because they also do not share common economic and reproductive goals. So that is both the cultural and the biological portions of this. So similar to polygyny, where multiple wives compete for their common husband's resources. So keep that in your back pocket. We're not going to discuss that too much right now.